All right, gentlemen, let us now hop into this coming weekend's UFC pay-per-view, UFC 274. All right. I believe we're touching on all of these fights. Of course, 274 is Oliveira versus Gaethje. Oh, my God. Perhaps, especially for MMA purists like ourselves, one of the most hotly anticipated bouts of the year. Let us start at the bottom of the card and work our way up for previews as we are accustomed to doing now. For these first few bouts, let's make some quick picks. All right, so starting us out in the bantamweight division, Newsome versus Fernie Garcia. Mark, why don't you take this one first?
Good scrap here. Could go either way. I have not been terribly impressed with Newsom's UFC run. So give me Garcia. He looked good on Contender Series. I will say he wins the decision.
Omar, take it.
Yeah, I would actually have to agree. Except I'm going to go with Garcia by a finish. I'm going to go with KO round 1.
Okay. I like Garcia as well. I'm going to go knockout in round 1 as well. Okay, in the women's strawweight division, Lupita Godinez against Ariane Carnelozzi. Omar, go first.
So Lupi's got a little bit of a name behind her, but I got to say the Soriso, she's got a bit of a run going on right now, and I like the way that she's actually been performing. She's had a loss to Angela Hill, but I think I'm going to go with Carnelozzi by second round submission.
Mark, take it.
Yeah, Carnelozzi could absolutely win this. She is very physically strong, which could end up being a factor. But I like Godinez. She's looked really good in her fights at 115. Her only loss was when she tried to move up. This is at 115. I think she continues to look good here. I will take her to win a decision.
I like it. I agree. All right, in the flyweight division, Cleditson Rodriguez versus Cj Vergara. Mark, why don't you go first?
There's some hype on Cleditson Rodriguez coming in. He is a talented striker. I will go with him to win this one on points.
Okay. Omar, what's your take?
I will go with Rodriguez by third round KO.
Okay. I'll go with that as well. All right, moving up into the women's flyweight division, Tracy Cortez, girlfriend of Brian T. City Ortega. Are they engaged or married at this point?
I want to say they might be engaged.
I feel like they're also engaged.
Yeah, good for him. Good for them, but good for him. Tracy Cortez taking on Melissa Gatto. Omar, go first.
Yeah, I'm actually a big fan of Tracy Cortez. I think she actually has really decent striking. She's got good takedown defense, and she's got heart, man. If nothing else, she's definitely a fighter for sure. Gatto's also a very scrappy person. She definitely comes to fight. She's got a few finishes in her career. But I think I'm going to go with Tracy Cortez, but I think this is going to be a hard-fought fight. I'm going to go with decision for her.
I like it. Mark, take it.
So, yeah, we're getting into some more credentialed people here now. I'll start giving the odds. Cortez is a slight favorite, minus 160. Gatto is the dog at plus 130. I'm still not sold on exactly how good Tracy Cortez is, which may not make sense because her resume is good. She has wins over Maria Agapova, over Erin Blanchfield, Justine Kish, Stephanie Egger. So I should probably be more sold than I am. But a couple of those were like debatable split decisions, and I don't know, I haven't been wowed. And Gatto is very physical. She's bigger. She impressed me in her last fight because I do rate Sarge Eubanks. I think Gatto is probably the better striker, and I think even if Cortez wrestles, which obviously she's going to look to do, I think Gatto can scramble and has a jits game to concern Cortez as well. So I'm going to go with Gatto to win this one. I could see her catch Cortez in a sub, but I think I will say decision for Gatto.
Man, if Tracy Cortez has been dating Brian Ortega as long as she has and doesn't have a jits game at this point, the hell have you been doing? What have you been doing?
It's a good point. Glad I said decision.
That's a great point. I'm going to go Tracy Cortez by unanimous decision in this one. All right, moving up to the welterweight division, Andre Fialo versus Cameron Van Camp. Mark, why don't you take this one first?
Fialo is minus 400 here. Van Camp is plus 300. He's making his debut. He is more so a lightweight than a welterweight. Granted, he does fight at both, so he's up at welterweight here. He was scheduled originally to debut in the UFC at lightweight. I forget against who, and it got canceled, so now he's debuting at welterweight. But it's hard to not pick Andre Fialo right now. He looks great. I think he can get a finish here. I don't think Van Camp will have the power to knock Fialo off his game, and I think Fialo picks him apart. I will say second round TKO.
All right. Omar, tell us what's what.
Yeah, this guy just murdered Miguel Baeza, so I kind of feel like I should probably go with Andre Fialo. I think he's obviously got a lot of power in his hands, and Baeza was putting it on him up until that point too, so he's definitely able to weather some shots if he needs to and kind of come out on top, find that shot that'll put somebody away. So I'm going to go with Fialo. I'm going to go with TKO round 2.
Oh, that was my pick. God damn it. I'm going Fialo round 2, TKO or knockout.
I said round 2 also. We all said the same
bingo.
thing.
Yeah, we're unanimous. Okay, here we go. These bouts that we're about to hop into are getting a little more consequential, so let's allow ourselves to have a little bit of elongated quick picks. All right, in the welterweight division, staying in the welterweight division, that is Francisco Trinaldo versus Danny Roberts. Mark, take it.
So this is a dead pick'em. Both guys are minus 110. Danny Roberts is always impossible for me to evaluate. He is 7-4 in the UFC, but he's always been a guy who seems to falter whenever he gets a step up, and Francisco Trinaldo is definitely that. And Roberts is also a guy who tends to win if he's not fighting a finisher. And if he is, then he generally looks good until he gets finished. So the question for me is simply, do I think Francisco Trinaldo at 43 years old, almost 44 years old, is still a dangerous enough finisher to take out Danny Roberts? And as good as Trinaldo has been in the UFC, that was all at lightweight. Roberts is going to have a 5-inch height and 4-inch reach advantage on him here. So I'm kind of thinking that he can avoid the finish. I never really expected to be picking Danny Roberts because he's not a guy that I love. But, if he does get dropped or even tapped, it would not shock me at all. I just feel like the guy finds ways to be finished. But I kind of feel like this is the right type of matchup where he could just stay safe and take a competitive decision, be the longer fighter, win on points. So I will say he does that with a little bit of an face about it. But Roberts 29-28. Maybe even a split.
Omar, take it.
Yeah, I personally think this is probably going to be one of the more lackluster fights of the entire night, to be honest. I see Danny Roberts using a lot of movements to try to stay away from Trinaldo, trying to work on the outside, trying to use his points to his advantage. And we've seen Trinaldo have a lot of issues with people who are rangy. He doesn't like to play that game a lot, and he gets very frustrated, and he lets the frustration get the best of him. And by the time you realize that the round's over, and he's just been pieced up, but nothing's really actually happened. So I don't see this being the most exciting fight, unfortunately. I'm always down to be proven wrong, but I do see Danny Roberts winning a decision, a unanimous one at that.
I'm going Trinaldo by unanimous decision. All right, moving up into the heavyweight division, Blagoy Ivanov, versus Marcos Rogerio De Lima. Omar, why don't you stay here and go first?
Bro, Blagoy Ivanov looks like he's like 45. This man is 35 years old.
Yeah. Getting stabbed in the heart will age you a few years.
Fucking hell, that's got to be a story. All right, so Ivanov versus Marcos Rogerio Pesao. Let's see. I really like Marcos Rogerio De Lima. I like the way he fights. I actually like his style very much. I think he's very, very dangerous on his feet, but he's also, I think, equally as dangerous on the ground when he gets the ability to get there. He has had faults on the ground before, but I think at this point it was to Alexander Romanov, who we know apparently is a monster, Stefan Struve, who has arms like a goddamn albatross, so I mean, that's going to happen. But like I said, his bread and butter seems to definitely be more the feet. So I'm going to go with Rogerio De Lima by knockout. Third round.
Mark, go ahead.
I was waiting for you.
Yep.
So, De Lima is a small dog here, plus 125. Ivanov is minus 150. De Lima has actually looked good at heavyweight, and he's gotten huge. It's hard to imagine that he used to be a 205-pounder. But Blagoy is really good. He's only 2-3 in the UFC, but all 3 losses were really close, and they were to Junior Dos Santos, Derek Lewis, and Augusto Sakai. So if you're giving close fights to guys like that, I kind of think you're going to be a level above De Lima. Ivanov is really hard to hurt. De Lima is someone who kind of relies on the finish. He doesn't really win decisions too often. So I think Ivanov will just be hard to hurt, rely on that veteran savvy, kind of mix it up if needed. And I think he frustrates De Lima actually a lot in this fight and gets it done, wins a clear decision.
Nice. I did not realize, or maybe I forgot that De Lima's nickname is also Bigfoot. I think that should not be allowed. There already is a Brazilian heavyweight named Bigfoot. Not allowed.
No, sir, too late. It's been used. Think of a new one.
I'm going to go Ivanov by knockout. Let's fucking say round 1. Let's go for it, baby. All right, moving down into the fly. Excuse me.
My pick is very very out there. Ivanov has never been knocked out in his career, so this will be a thing if it happens.
Nice. All right, moving down into the flyweights, Brandon Raw Dog Roy Val versus Matt Schnell. A fun fight at flyweight. Mark, go first.
So Roy Val's a pretty good favorite here. He's minus 250. Schnell is plus 200 the other way. Schnell is a really solid all-around fighter, but I don't think he can threaten Brandon Royval enough to beat him. I don't think there's enough for Royval to be concerned about, and if that's the case, he can just freely be the friggin' Tasmanian devil that he is, and I think Schnell will be in trouble. I don't trust him to stay safe in that wildness and in the pressure that Royval brings. I don't think he can make Royval back off, and I think it might be a tough night for him. I think Royval can get him out of there. Maybe I see like a club and sub. Could also just be a straight sub, but I kind of like the club and sub. But either way, I will say Schnell is tapping in round 2.
Omar, what's your take?
Yeah, I actually think that's also my pick as well. I mean, I love the way Royval's crazy game works. We always talk about having him just sort of tighten things up a little bit when necessary, and I think we saw that. We saw a lot of adjustments in his last fight with Bonserine. So I'm hopeful that mind, that process, that fighter IQ is going to continue. So I'm going to give Royval the win, second round submission as well.
I'm rolling with my boy, Brandon Royval. I'm going to say round 1, submission by Brandon Royval, because for those flyweights, man, 5 minutes feels like an eternity because those guys fight so fast. They do so much fighting within the time of a round. Like one round for flyweights feels like 2 rounds. So I'm going to say towards the end of round 1, I think he's going to hurt Matt Schnell and jump right on him, and we're going to get probably like a rear naked victory for Brandon Royval. All right, moving up to the women's featherweight division, Macy Schazon versus Norma Dumont. Mark, why don't you take this one first?
So Schazon, as you said, moving up here, she is the dog, plus 190. Dumont is a pretty good favorite at minus 225. Macy Schazon is obviously jumping up here to try to get a win and suddenly be in the title mix by fighting at 145 instead of 135, so I can't hate on the move. She is way bigger, which is interesting. She is 4 inches taller and has a 5-inch reach advantage. Granted, she doesn't necessarily use her reach when she fights, so maybe it's not as big of a factor. But it's still, the fact that the 135er is that much bigger is pretty interesting. Dumont does look solid everywhere, both offensively and defensively. She really nullified Aspen Ladd in her last fight. Granted, some of that was probably on Ladd as well. But Dumont is not an easy fight. I'm torn. I kind of see a possibility where Schazon looks great, and we're all like, wow, Macy Schazon should have always been a featherweight. But I think Dumont has a better understanding of how to win fights. I kind of think Schazon is lacking in that IQ area sometimes. So I will go with Dumont to dictate a somewhat boring fight and win a decision.
Omar?
I would like to believe that with Schazon having a size advantage, that she would actually use it to her advantage. I would like to think that her coaches are going to set her up for success in that respect, because I think without her having to cut as much weight, she's definitely going to carry a lot more power into this weight division, and especially if she's going to be the bigger person, she's basically got two advantages right there, where a lot of people might only have one moving up a division. So I'm optimistic that Schazon will have a good performance, so I'm hoping she goes with a unanimous decision.
Okay. I agree. I think Schazon is going to go winner by UD. All right, boys. For the rest of these fights, I think let's go over a little fuller breakdown here. In the welterweight division, we have Randy Brown taking on Chaos Williams. What a name, man! Imagine popping out the baby at that hospital. You're like, you know what, I'm going to name my son?
Real name, dude. It's not his real
Chaos.
name.
It's not?
No, his name's Kalen.
Oh, God damn it. I thought it was.
But he's one of those guys that never uses his actual name, so I don't blame you.
Man, acting like a Brazilian out here, man.
It's Kalen Chaos Williams.
It's Chaos the Ox Fighter is technically his full nickname.
What a nickname, the Ox Fighter. All right, so we have Randy Brown.
What does it even mean?
Randy Brown coming off back-to-back wins. Most recently, a unanimous decision against Jared Gooden back in October of 2021. Chaos Williams also coming off 2 wins. Most recently, TKOing Miguel Baeza back in November. So, Mark, why don't you lead us off here and break down Randy Brown taking on Kalen Chaos, the Oxblood Fighter Williams.
So I love this fight. It's basically a pick'em. Randy Brown is technically the dog. He's plus 100. Chaos Williams, slight favorite, minus 120. This fight is violence. I fully expect someone to get hurt in this fight. I'm really torn because Randy Brown is the better fighter. Like, if we're checking boxes, it's Randy Brown in almost every single box other than power. But, God, I think we can all see Chaos Williams just flatlining him because that's what Chaos Williams does to people. Brown has been KO'd before by Vicente Luque and even from Nico Price with hammer fist from his back, if you remember, which was crazy. So his chin can certainly be cracked. Chaos has more or less murdered people in his UFC tenure. The only person who got the better of him was Michel Pereira, who was a huge welterweight. But Brown is pretty big himself. Brown is 3 inches taller than Chaos. He has a 1-inch reach advantage on him. Usually the reach is in Chaos's favor. He's very long. So that's something to think about. A little harder for Chaos to get to the chin of Randy Brown. I don't know. Put it this way. Randy Brown is either going to be winning this fight and keep winning it, or he's going to be winning this fight and then get put to sleep. I do think he is the better fighter. But I think I got to go with him because I can't shake the vision of how mature Randy Brown looked in his last fight. He was so poised. He was so comfortable. He's fast. He really looks like he's coming into his own. So I think that's enough to make me believe I am going to go with Randy Brown by UD in a fight where both guys get hurt at times, but he will be walking a tightrope the whole fight.
Omar, tell us what's what.
I'm a Randy Brown fan. I don't pick against Randy Brown for better or worse. I love the way Randy Brown fights. I've been a big fan of his technique from jump, and I think in his last fight, just like Mark was saying, if you didn't notice it, if you go back and you watch it, his use of kicks in that fight is so phenomenal. His ability to change levels with his kicks, create distance with his kicks. Somebody that size with the length that he has with his legs should be making the most out of the length of those legs. And he really was. And so I expect him to kind of bring the same sort of technique to this fight as well. And it's really hard to punch somebody in the face when you're getting kicks thrown to your head. So I hope that Randy Brown has a good, solid game plan. It's not a wonder what Chaos Williams is trying to do in that fight. He's not trying to win by points. He is trying to go out there and he's trying to rip your head off. So I hope their game plan works around that. I hope that the game plan isn't to wait for Chaos Williams to try to take his head off, though. I hope we're not going to be playing the waiting game. I hope that Randy Brown comes forward, pushes the pressure, and then adjusts when Chaos Williams starts to try to land blows on him. But if we end up playing the waiting game, this is going to be it's not going to go the way I think Randy Brown thinks it's going to go. But I'm optimistic. I think Randy Brown knows how to get this done. I will go with Randy Brown by unanimous decision.
I'm sticking with my man, Chaos, who I know so well that I know his first name. I'm going to go Chaos Williams by TKO or knockout in round number 2.
Oof. Damn.
Yeah, I love the way the guy fights. He's must-see TV.
Oh, he's like a throwback fighter.
Yeah, he kind of is. You're right. All right, moving on to the people's fight of the night. Man, 2 legends throwing down in the lightweight division. We have Donald Cowboy Cerrone taking on Joe Lozon. Neither one really needing an introduction. But what the heck, Donald Cerrone, of course, the legend of legends, really, guys. He is the 39-year-old Coloradan. He is fighting now for his son, Danger. I believe his son's name is Danger.
It is indeed.
He's got 2 sons now, I want to say.
What's that?
I think he has 2 sons now, I want to say.
Oh, does he?
I kind of think so. I could be wrong, but I think so.
Good for him, man. Good for him. He got all choked up at the press conference talking about how his son's going to see him when he walks out, and he's going to know what Daddy does for a living now, and how cool that he thinks that's going to be. And good for him, man. Good for him. But that being said, as much of a legend as Cowboy Cerrone is, he has a lot of red on his record as of late, the past few years. He has not tasted victory since defeating Ally Quinta back in May of 2019, and he has lost 5 of his last 6, most recently getting TKO'd by Alex Morono back in May of 2021. So he's definitely looking to get back in the win column in lightweight. Then we have Joe Lozon, another legend, the Massachusetts native, really needing no introduction. Of course, he's been a lightweight fighter in the UFC for as long as I can remember. He's a fan favorite because he always brings it, and he always comes to fight. He's coming off a win, a TKO victory against Jonathan Pierce back in October of 2019, so a bit of a layoff for Joe Lozon. And guys, this is going to be a great scrap. I'm glad these 2 guys are facing off. Mark, let me start with you. What's your take and what's your pick ultimately of Donald Cerrone taking on Joe Lozon?
So yeah, Cowboy does have 2 sons. The other one is named Riot. So Danger and Riot.
Ryan, okay.
But oops, what I just click? Yikes! Good
Wait, did you say Ryan or Riot?
No, Riot.
Like we need to stop the riot.
Yes.
It gets nicer though. It's Riot River.
Oh.
So that's softer.
Is Danger the first name of his first son, or is it the middle name?
It's the middle. It's Daxon
That's what I
Danger.
Thought. What is it?
Daxon. Dacson.
Daxon Danger. Right.
Wow. Okay, back to the fight. Cerrone is the favorite here. He's minus 180. Joe Lozon is plus 150, so fairly close. It's kind of nuts that we're getting this fight. I honestly love it. It's 2 guys who feel like they should have crossed paths before and never have. Joe Lozon, as Mike said, hasn't fought in almost 3 years. He did win his last fight, but he had lost 3 straight before that. Cowboy hasn't fought in a year and hasn't won a fight since 2019, which is hard to even imagine with someone like a resume like his. To be honest, what we have here is 2 legends, one more legendary than the other, to be fair, whose best days have passed them by. But I'm still very excited to see them throw down. It's a little scary for Cerrone because lately he doesn't react well to pressure, and not only will Lozon pressure you, but if he sees you not reacting well, he smells blood like no one else. But I have to still pick Cerrone here simply because in these guys' primes, Cerrone would have beaten Lozon every single time, in my opinion. And I get it that these are not their primes, but I just can't convince myself that Cerrone is not going to beat Joe Lozon. Lozon won't have an advantage on the mat, how he's accustomed to with most opponents, because Cerrone is just as nasty there. I hope that Cerrone is still the more dangerous striker. Plus, he is still very much training MMA, whereas Joe was kind of like out of the MMA world and is jumping back in for a chance to fight Cowboy. So I'm going to go with Cowboy, and fuck it. I'm going to say we get a vintage Cowboy moment. Big head kick. Lozon drops. Cerrone either jumps on him with punches or with a choke or something and gets him out of there in round 2.
Nice. All right, Omar, give us your take.
You know, as I watch these thumbnails of Joe Lozon and Cerrone, all that keeps going in my head is that moment in Jumanji when he comes out and he's like, "What year is it?" It's all that keeps running in my head right now because this fight should have happened like 10 years ago at this point, if not longer. So, I'm honestly less interested in this fight now than I would have been 10 years ago, but here we are. I do think Cerrone is still the better fighter. I don't know where the fall-offs are, though, for both of these guys, right? Like, Cerrone's not the same guy that he was in the past. He's got miles to him at this point. But Joe Lozon also, how much has he improved in the recent years? I would think not as much at this point. His fight game is his fight game, and I don't think he's radically changed. And his major weapons have frankly been his right hand and his ground game. And I just don't think that he's going to be able to implement that game against Cerrone the way he would have been successful back in the day against guys who just weren't nearly as skilled. But nowadays, I don't think his game works for a multitude of people. So I'm going to go with Donald Cerrone, and I'm going to go also with a finish. I'm going to go round 1 KO.
Man, I kind of want to be the contrarian and go Joe Lozon, but I'm not going to go against Dad ×2 Donald Cerrone. And I'm going to agree with Mark. I'm going to say we're going to get a vintage Cerrone performance. Let's go fast switch kick. He catches Joe Lozon, and he jumps on him, and he finishes him. Let's go round 2. I feel like every fucking pick I made tonight has been round 2.
It's exactly the same pick I had, yeah.
Yeah.
We're on the same page. I will say this. If Cowboy loses to Joe, that's got to be it.
Well, so Dana White has said kind of on the record that, you know, when we're getting to these, but Michael Chandler and Tony Ferguson is not a do-or-die fight like a lot of people seem to be having insinuated over the last few weeks. However, Joe Lozon, I don't know why. The point is it's not. Joe Lozon versus Donald Cerrone, however, is a do-or-die fight. Apparently, it's, you know, loser kind of leaves at this point. So it's a big deal.
I mean, my man, Donald Cowboy Cerrone, he has 1 pro boxing fight, 29 kickboxing fights, and 54, making his 55th walk in MMA this Saturday night. God, this guy's got a lot of miles on his body.
With a chance to move back into the lead for most UFC wins, if he can win.
Wow.
He's a legend,
All
dude.
right. Yeah, man. Sure. Fucking legend. Fucking put him in the Hall of Fame immediately when he retires.
Yeah. Yes.
Let's move on.
Speaking of legends.
What's that?
Speaking of legends.
Speaking of legends, in the light heavyweight division, we're getting treated to a Mauricio Shogun Rua sighting, taking on Ovens St. Preux. Rua, the 40-year-old Brazilian fighting out of Curitiba, he has been an MMA legend as long as some MMA fighters have careers. He's fought in the UFC for many years, fought in Pride. Mainly Pride is where he really kind of became known. And he's coming off of a loss, of course, to the Scotsman Paul Craig, losing by TKO back in November of 2020. So he's returning right now. And then we have OSP, who I think is going to be a kind of a tall order for Shogun, but we're going to get into that. Coming off of back-to-back losses, both knockout losses against Jamal Hill and Tanner Boser. But still, a record, nothing to scoff at, 25-16 as a pro. Always a dangerous guy at light heavyweight. Omar, let me throw it over to you first. What is your take and ultimately your pick of Shogun Rua taking on OSP?
I did not realize that their records are almost virtually identical at this point. Oven St. Preux is 25-16.
Virtually identical.
and Shogun is 27-12-1. So
and OSP is also 39 years old. He's been around.
Wow, really? Fuck.
Yeah. They're not very far off from one another, and I don't think I ever really realized that. Shogun is 40, OSP is 39, man. They're right there.
I can't believe he's 39.
It seemed like OSP was just younger and, you know, I guess had the better record or something like that, but not really. It doesn't really seem that way. What I will say is Ovince St. Preux, I think, is one of these guys that hits very hard in that division. He has a lot of different tools that he uses on the stand-up. The thing I'm concerned about specifically for Hua is always, at this point and forever, going to be his chin. We know that Shogun can crack. We know that he knows how to throw a punch and land stuff. We know that he's not going to step back for a majority of that fight. The man comes forward. We know that if you deform his face, he's still going to fight you. So there's not a lot that's going to deter Shogun Hua from coming at St. Preux. And St. Preux doesn't do very well with pressure. He does back up, and he does end up getting gas as a result of it. And so that is my one big worry for St. Preux throughout this fight. Everything on paper, in my opinion, though, says that St. Preux should win this fight. He's got the reach advantage. He should have the size advantage. He should have a power advantage as well. But Shogun is Shogun, man. And on his worst day, he always has a puncher's chance of putting somebody's lights out. So
Sure.
With that in mind, I still will be going St. Preux. I'll go St. Preux by decision.
Okay, Mark, give us your take.
So St. Preux is the favorite here, minus 250. Shogun is plus 200. Yeah, so we go from a couple legends to maybe an even bigger legend in Shogun. This one is a rematch for anyone who may have forgotten. The first one lasted all of 34 seconds before OSP KO'd Shogun. I would expect we're going to get to see this one play out a little longer this time. OSP, with all his warts, is still a skilled fighter and is generally winning when he's not getting KO'd. And I'm just not sure Shogun is still the necessary type of KO threat at this point in his career to deter OSP. I think OSP could look to take him down here, lean on his size, lean on his wrestling, maybe even try to find a sub. Granted, Shogun is always really underrated on the ground, as he showed in his first fight with Paul Craig, where he hung with him down there for a while in the draw. Let me be clear. OSP should win this fight. It's hard to pick Shogun, but guess what I'm going to do? Because this is my show, and I can do what I want. And I want to watch a card where Cowboy and Shogun win back-to-back fights.
Let's go.
I'm going to pick Shogun Hua, round 2 knockout, big hook on a combo, OSP drops, pride, never die, let's go.
I'm going to disagree with you, and I'm going to say that Shogun Hua at this point, even though these guys are pretty close in age and pretty close in records, with the smaller frame that he has, I think he's going to have just too many miles, too many fights, too much damage on him. And OSP being the bigger guy, I think his size differential and power difference is just going to make the difference. And I think he's going to land and hurt Shogun, and I'm going to say he's going to get him out of there. Let's go round 3 TKO. All right, gentlemen. Moving.
Time to buckle up.
Yeah, man. Here we go. Lightweight division, we have Michael Chandler taking on El Cucuy. Tony Ferguson. Michael Chandler, the more recent entrant into the UFC, the 36-year-old, born in Missouri, resides in Tennessee, fighting out of Boca Raton, Florida. So he is America through and through, touching all the corners of the U.S. He is 1-3 in the UFC, though. He won his debut against Dan Hooker in a very impressive fashion, then lost a very close back-and-forth title fight against Charles do Bronx Oliveira, and then lost a barn burner against Justin Gaethje. So even in back-to-back losses, I don't think Michael Chandler's stock has been hurt that much. And then you have Tony Ferguson, who himself is somewhat of a legend himself, and especially in the lightweight division. He is 38 years old. He is from Oxnard, California, fighting out of Orange County. Things have not been going great for him. As of late, he's dropped 3 in a row against Justin Gaethje, Oliveira, and Beneil Dariush. So all of his losses recently have come against the very best in the lightweight division. Mark, let me start with you here. Great fight. Very hotly anticipated fight between Chandler and Ferguson. What's your take? And ultimately give us your pick.
This fight. Chandler's a big favorite. He's minus 400. Tony is plus 300.
Wow.
It feels very strange to me that people are looking past Tony Ferguson. It really does. But at the same time, I'm kind of one of these people. Like, it kind of just feels like Tony's time has very suddenly passed. And, like, because it feels so sudden, there's a part of my brain that wants to tell me I'm nuts and that Tony Ferguson is going to win by butchering like he used to. But the way he has looked lately has been concerning. Like, it's been 3 fights in a row where he can't even get his game going. And he just looks old suddenly. He even visually looks old. I don't know if you guys have seen, like, the countdown or the embeddeds for this fight. Like, he looks old all of a sudden. I don't think this matchup is any easier than his last ones. You know, Michael Chandler is relentless. He's a dog. He can wrestle. He can scramble. He has big power. And most important of all that is he's so fast. And I think that speed is going to be a major problem for Tony. Like, Tony has looked slow in his last few fights against guys who are not close to as fast as Michael Chandler. So while I respect Tony so much, and I kind of can't believe we're here this quickly, as I said, and I'm so tempted to be like, oh, man, I got to bet on Tony at plus 300 odds. Like, what in the hell is Tony Ferguson plus 300? But I can't really find a reasoning for why he would beat Michael Chandler. It feels like it would have to be a finish if he did it. I guess maybe I could see Chandler winning the first 2 rounds and Tony rallying late in the third and maybe hurting Chandler. But, you know, I think that's getting a little crazy. I think Chandler fights a lot more controlled in this fight. He said it a lot of times that he totally ignored the game plan against Gaethje, and he can't let himself do that again because it is about winning, and he kind of forgot it in that fight. I think everything favors Chandler. I think he knows he needs this win. I don't think he messes around. I will say Michael Chandler, UD.
Okay, Omar, give us your take and your pick.
I'd have to agree because Ferguson losing doesn't really concern me because Ferguson lost to the top of the top, the cream of the crop, right? It's Gaethje, it's Oliveira, and Dariush is right there, man. Not many people at this point are touching Dariush right now, so I'm not concerned with who he lost to. I am massively concerned with how he lost.
Yep.
Justin Gaethje, if this wasn't a fight inside of a cage, Justin Gaethje would still be in prison for what he did to Tony Ferguson that night. That was like 8 ass beatings in one fight.
That was tough to watch.
It was very tough to watch. Broke his whole face. And that was probably the most damage that Tony Ferguson has ever had in his career. Probably the most damage he's had added up throughout his whole career in one fight. It was terrifying to watch him take all that damage. So that's number one. Charles Oliveira suns him from beginning to end with no debate. And then Dariush also suns him from beginning to end. So I don't have as much confidence in Tony Ferguson to get things done anymore. There is a sluggishness about him at this point where he used to have this explosiveness, his ability to, those Imanari rolls, you can see them coming from a mile away at this point. You know what I mean? The spinning back elbows don't have the same sort of surprise that I feel like they once used to. Michael Chandler is a goddamn specimen. That man has been an athlete and has kept his body in athletic shape since he was like 2. I mean, he talks about wrestling all the time, how this is basically how he's grown up. And we see a lot of fighters who like to jump in weight and I'm not fighting right now, so I'm going to balloon up to this. Michael Chandler doesn't play that shit. Michael Chandler might gain a little weight here and there, whatever, but we're not talking like he's not Patty Pimbletting his life, right? You're not going to see a 210-pound Michael Chandler after this fight is done. And so Michael Chandler physically is a real big problem for Tony because that athleticism is going to play a role in that fight. And Tony Ferguson is super liable to get his ass real hurt in this fight. So I hope we have a good referee for this fight. I hope we're not giving Tony Ferguson the benefit of the doubt because of how tough Tony Ferguson is. I think we saw from the Gaethje fight that fight could have been stopped a lot sooner than it was, and I don't think anybody would have been that upset about it. So hopefully we have some good refereeing going on in this fight. I do think Michael Chandler is going to beat the brakes off of Tony Ferguson. I am going to go with a KO by round 2.
Yeah, I've said it before on this show that the flip side of unorthodox is sloppy. And that's how Tony has looked in his past 3 fights. I mean, I do think that Justin Gaethje took something from Tony Ferguson.
Yes.
That he will not be getting back. And, he looked wild and kind of, messy against Beneil, against Charles, and he got kind of taken apart by those guys. Yeah, I would love to see Tony return to form. Tony Ferguson has never been a guy at lightweight to have devastating power. I would say at his peak, at his prime, he had good stinging power, but not like a guy like Michael Chandler, man. So I agree with you guys, and I think that Michael Chandler is going to go ding and ring his bell, man, and he's going to leap in there with one of those huge right straights, and I think it's going to be night-night for Tony Ferguson. If it's not an outright knockout, he's going to leap on him and swarm. Michael Chandler is great at swarming, and we're going to see him get him out of there. I'll say round 1. I think it's just going to happen real quick because Michael Chandler, he comes, he likes to start fast. I know he said that he's going to try to be a little more composed, but that's also not really Michael Chandler's style. Michael Chandler brings some heat, and I think towards the end of round 1, I think we're going to see him get him out of there. Are we unanimous again?
I think so.
Yeah, we're unanimous. Just quick to your point on Justin Gaethje, I also think that a lot of what Tony Ferguson was mental. I think in his own head for a long time, he 100% believed it was not possible for him to be beat. And then the way Justin drubbed him, I think, has affected him significantly and has affected the way he fought Oliveira and Dariush. He's even... I saw that he is now training in the middle of the night because he said he realized that training in the day was letting people see what he does, and he's just saying shit that's making you think this guy has been mentally broken a little bit. So I think that's a big part of it.
Yeah. What were you going to say?
I was going to say that. Well, just responding to that, just Ferguson's never been the quote unquote normal guy. I'm pretty sure we could have a 2-day video compilation of all the weird shit that man has said over the years. And he's got some sound bites, man. I'm an ankle pick you. You know what I mean? Now this whole thing with I want to join pro baseball. Dana White's a drug lord and doesn't want to let me do anything and is stopping me from boxing and all this other stuff. So Tony Ferguson is always on some shit. No matter what day, what time of the year it is, he's always on something. So his mental game has always been a factor for me as far as that part is concerned. And I do think Justin took something away from him. It very well might be something physical. It very well might be something mental. But he just seems like he's not with the shits anymore. He doesn't like playing this game anymore. He doesn't like. I don't even really know if he likes being in the UFC anymore, if he even really wants to fight anymore. I think Ferguson is in one of those positions where he may not have invested his money the right way, and so this is still something he needs to do. I do think Ferguson probably finds a lot more success outside of the UFC at this point. I'm down to be proven wrong, like I always say. This is one of those sports where when I get proven wrong, it's because something absolutely miraculous has happened. So if that does happen, I'm always down for it. But it just seems like Tony Ferguson is kind of is not the same and won't be able to provide the same type of fight like he once used to. So,
okay,
yeah.
All right, boys, let us move on to the co-main event, and what a co-main! By the way, real quick, this card, great card.
Yeah.
Oh yeah. Great card.
Pretty friggin' deep. In the co-main event, we get 30 Thug Rose Namajunas taking on Carla Esparza for the second time. That's right, this is a rematch. The two fought way back in late 2014 in what was the inaugural fight for the women's strawweight championship in the UFC. And that fight was won by Carla Esparza by submission via rear naked choke in round number 3. And all these years later, the title had changed hand a few times, and now Thug Rose is the champ once again. She's coming off of three consecutive wins against Andrade, winning that rematch, and then 2 fights against Zhang Weili. All 6 of Thug Rose's last fights are all rematches. She fought JJ twice, Andrade twice, and Weili twice. Carla Esparza, as I mentioned, was the first UFC women's strawweight champion, has since lost the belt. But she is streaking once again, riding a 5-fight win streak into this Saturday night, most recently getting a TKO victory against Yan Xiaonan back in May of 2021. Omar, let me start with you this time. What's your take on this historic rematch of Rose Namajunas and Carla Esparza, and ultimately give us your pick?
So we are just shy of about 8 years removed from that first fight, and they were both very different fighters back then. I would say Rose probably a lot more than Carla Esparza. Carla Esparza's game, for the most part, has stayed pretty much the same throughout her career. The reality is her wrestling, though, is relatively elite compared to most of the other women that are in that division. I think the person she had the real tough time against was Tatiana Suarez, who was not only bigger than her, but her wrestling was probably comparable to her as well. But, you know, Rose has had a very successful career since losing to Carla Esparza. Really turned up the level in her game. Got with Trevor Whitman, like we know, and has been part of that little small class of fighters that has really taken everything to the next level. Her fights against Joanna Jędrzejczyk are legendary at this point. You know, there will always be that argument whether JJ tapped or not to strikes, and I still say that she did. I think you can visibly see that she tapped to those strikes. She denies it to her dying breath, which I totally get. You know, she was able to come back against that nasty slam from her head against Andrade and put an entire beating on her for the majority of that fight. The Weili Zhang fight, she was able to knock out a fighter who we thought was going to be one of the next big things in that division, and then solidified it with another decision after that, which was a hard-fought fight and a close fight. But Rose has come so far, and I think Rose's biggest issues have always been her mental fortitude and her ability to kind of make sure that she doesn't get in her own way, because I think skill for skill, she's always had the ability to beat anybody on that roster. So it's been nice to see her be able to kind of get everything in line, put everything together, including her mental game, and really find a lot of success. With all that being said, I think this is the time where she can beat Carla Esparza. And that's saying something, because Carla Esparza is a very consistent fighter, a very good fighter, and she's been elite for a long time. So I think Rose can get it done. I do think it's a very hard-fought fight. I do think it will be a very close fight. I think it will be 3-2, but I do think Rose wins it, unanimous decision.
All right, Mark, what are your thoughts on the rematch between Thug Rose and the Cookie Monster, Carla Esparza?
So Rose is favored. She's minus 210. Carla Esparza is plus 170. We get another rematch here. I think it's the third one that we've previewed tonight. What's crazy, though, is that a lot of new fans may not even realize this is a rematch. As you said, first time these two fought was back in 2014 when Carla choked out Rose to become the first strawweight champ. So it's a rematch that has been a long time coming, and one that I'm sure Rose is very excited to get back. But real quick, I want to give props to Carla for getting here, because when she dropped that belt to Joanna, and she dropped it bad, she got destroyed by Joanna. She then went 3-3 in her next 6 fights, and it kind of felt like, man, good thing Carla got to have that belt when this division was in its infancy, because she'd never be able to get it right now. And now here we are, 5 fights later, 5 straight wins over really good girls, and Carla's fighting for the title again. So that's awesome, and props to her on this run. I will say, kind of, Omar touched on this as well. As much as Carla has improved on this run, Her striking is better. Her aggression is better. Her willpower, I would say, is stronger. She's still, in a nutshell, a similar fighter to what she was then. She still has the same game. What's crazy is that even though it's fairly one note and you know exactly what she's going to do, she somehow still does it against girls like Alexa Grasso and Marina Rodriguez and Xiaonan Yan. None of them have been able to do enough to stop it. And Rose can be taken down. We saw it against Weili more than once. Weili had some success with the wrestling, and Carla's a better wrestler than Weili is. But switching to Rose, again, as Omar touched on, she is an entirely different fighter now from what she was then. She barely even resembles the fighter that lost to Carla the first time. And I do think in that Weili fight that I just mentioned that a lot of that wrestling success was because of the threat Weili also posed on the feet. Whereas Carla is a straight wrestler. She poses no threat on the feet. And I don't think a straight wrestler can beat Rose anymore. I think Rose has evolved too far. I think her footwork has reached an almost untouchable level. Her movement, her confidence, and just the danger she presents are so different now from what they were the first time she fought Carla. And I think it's going to be a lot harder for Carla to bring her down. And even when and if it hits the ground, Rose is really good on the bottom as well, which she also showed against Weili. Mm-hmm. So it's just a tricky proposition for Carla. And the thing that I haven't even said yet is the main thing, which is that while Carla tries to navigate that footwork and find a takedown, she is going to be getting pieced apart by Rose. The skill gap on the feet is still pretty wide, and the power gap is pretty wide. And I think Carla is going to maybe feel a little overwhelmed whenever they're standing from what's coming back at her. So she absolutely deserves this shot. I'm glad she's getting it. It was a question for a little bit there. I'm glad to see the bookies respecting it. It's fairly close lines. I feel like sometimes Carla Esparza does not get the respect she deserves. But I don't think she can beat this Rose. I think Rose lands something big by round 3, maybe when they're in close, something in the clinch like an elbow. Esparza goes on wobbly legs. Rose finishes the job. Round 3, TKO.
Oh, what a pick. Yeah, this is a tough fight for me to pick because, like you said, I totally agree. I think Esparza is sort of underrated. I mean, she's a fantastic record. She's 18-6. She's tough to beat. She's a tough out. She's a tough girl. As good as Rose is, I don't see Rose getting Carla out of there, but I will have to go Rose by unanimous decision. I think she's going to clearly win on the feet. I don't think she's going to be able to stop the takedown because that's generally what the Cookie Monster does. The Cookie Monster eats. But I don't think the takedowns are going to be enough. I think Rose is going to neutralize her enough on the ground, threaten with some submissions, and ultimately get up in a few positions and do enough to win this fight by unanimous decision.
Dude, and I
anything
like,
else you guys want to say about the co-main?
I feel bad for Carla Esparza because she's been putting off her wedding to get this fight, and so she's planning on having her wedding basically like right after this fight is over, and like I just don't see her winning. And I feel so bad having this girl have to go and get married, knowing she just got her ass beat for this title, and that part just sucks. I hope for the best
do it
for her
without a fucked up face.
Hopefully, yeah. I feel bad for her.
All right, boys, we made it. We have arrived to the main event of UFC 274, Oliveira versus Gaethje. In the lightweight division, we have Charles do Bronx Oliveira defending his UFC light heavyweight title against Justin the Highlight Gaethje. So we have Gaethje, the challenger, the 33-year-old, fighting out of Colorado. His record stands, one moment. His record stands at 23-3. Good Lord, what a record. With 19 wins coming by way of knockout. Add a submission in there for good measure. He's coming off of that barn burner victory against Michael Chandler back in November. My God, aside from Khabib, who defeated him back in October of 2020, he is 5 of his last 6, and he is very much deserving of this title shot. But it is no easy task. Charles Oliveira has earned it. As Dustin Poirier would say, he has paid in full. He is the 32-year-old fighting out of Brazil, of course. He is the submission expert. He has 41 fights on his record, 32-8 and 1 no contest. And he is on quite the tear in his career. He has won 10 fights in a row going into Saturday night. Most recently, of course, defeating Dustin the Diamond Poirier by rear naked choke back in December. Mark, let me start with you. What a main event. What a lightweight title fight. What do you make of it? And give us your pick.
I make of it that I love it. Oliveira is minus 175. Gaethje is plus 145. A lot of fights we've talked through on this episode tonight, but this one is the fight. We are locking two of the greatest finishers the sport of MMA has ever seen in a cage and seeing who comes out alive. And that is why we watch. I could talk about this fight for half an hour. I will do my best to not do that. Gaethje's been talking a lot about how he's going to break Charles in there, mentally and physically. And Justin has done that to plenty of people, so it's not impossible. But the Charles Oliveira that we are in the midst of right now is a stone-cold killer. He has won 10 fights in a row, and if it wasn't for Tony Ferguson being a psycho who doesn't tap to a broken arm, it would be 10 finishes in a row, which is just silly. And as close and competitive as this fight is, if you've been watching this show for any amount of time, you already know who I'm going to pick, and that's Charles Oliveira. I love Justin Gaethje. Justin Gaethje is an unbelievable fighter, but I think he is stepping in front of a man who can't be beat right now. And frankly, I think this fight is going to look pretty similar to the Dustin Poirier fight. I think Justin will come out hot. I think he may even hurt Charles in round 1, but Charles will be fine. He won't go away. And at some point in time, Gaethje gets caught up in the octopus that is Charles Oliveira. It really does feel like the guy has extra limbs once he gets into these grappling exchanges. Justin's only real range weapon is his leg kicks. All his punches are hooks and uppercuts and things in closer range. He's not the jab guy. And when it comes to those leg kicks, Charles is always really light on the front foot, so I don't know if Justin is going to be able to rip his legs with as much success as he's used to having. And if he has to be inside with Charles, that's just a wildly dangerous place to be because it's so easy to get wrapped up by him out of the blue. Plus, Justin has to be careful in all these exchanges not to be taken down, so he can't just throw with that wild abandon that he's able to in most of his other fights. And then, not to mention, Charles has nice range weapons himself, like his jab and his front kick, so I think he can almost use those to kind of dictate when he wants the range to open and close in this fight. Granted, Justin, you know how he is. He's going to try to crash through and walk forward, and he has said it. He said, there's one fight in my life where I made my game plan alter from continually walking forward, and it was the Khabib fight, and I'll never do it again in my life. So we know he's going to try to walk forward. I just think it's a tough matchup for him. I do think he can hurt Charles, but I think Charles can hurt him as well, and I think we see some violent exchanges. But I just think at a certain point it's too hard to keep Charles off you. I think maybe they're in an exchange. Charles shoots a double. Gaethje maybe like half stuffs it, but turns a little bit. Next thing you know, Charles is on his back, standing RNC. It's the same thing I predicted against Dustin, which was correct. But like I said, I think Justin and Dustin have similar weaknesses when matched up with Charles. I do think Justin can do it. I think his timing and his calm in the fire make him like extremely unique in his ability to finish people. And we know Charles can be hit. But I think Justin needs to fight a perfect fight to do it. And I think there's too much on the scale in Charles' favor. So, yeah, I will say at some point, Gaethje turns, when he shouldn't. Charles is on the back. Next thing you know, tapping, rear naked choke, and still Charles Oliveira. I'll say round 3.
Oh, round 3, rear naked.
Omar didn't go yet if you want to save
Not a
yourself.
bad pick. Yeah, I know.
I thought you were going.
All right, Omar. Lay it on us.
I'm going to go the other direction. I think Justin Gaethje's hands, man, are terrifying. If there's a couple things that I think are going to be a fact in this fight, Charles Oliveira is going to get hit. That's a fact. Charles Oliveira is going to get rocked at some point. I also think that that's a fact. Where I think Charles Oliveira has excelled at this point is he doesn't quit anymore. And you can't tell me that man didn't quit in the past, because you saw it all over his face right before he rolled over onto his side, waiting for the referee to come and stop that fight. He doesn't do that anymore. So, you know, the bitch that lives inside of him, he's able to quell that guy, keep that down, and he's been able to fight through a lot of fires and come out on top. And he went through a little bit of that against the Chandler fight. That Chandler fight was not an easy fight for him to get through. Like he
Poirier wasn't either.
Facts. I mean, he walked through some shit for those fights, and I don't think the Oliveira from 7-8 years ago would have been able to do anything close to that. So there is something to be said definitely for the evolution of Charles Oliveira, but there's also something to be said for the evolution of Justin Gaethje, because the man is the epitome of controlled chaos, and probably the most controlled chaos in that entire UFC organization. His ability to be so destructive and disgustingly accurate with those hooks is something that is not normal and not something you see very often in any combat sport. Normally people are using jabs to set things up and things like that. Justin is literally winging left and right hooks, but they're so damn accurate and they're so short. They're not these long looping hooks that come from he's here and then he's here. I mean, he's not wasting any energy. He's not wasting any distance. And he's very technical about the way he's been throwing his strikes. So I think he's got the gas for it, which is another thing that comes along with having to throw a lot of heavy hooks. We've seen Conor McGregor throw the heaviest of hooks, and by round 2, the man looks like he needs to take a nap. So I think Gaethje's not going to have that problem. I think he's got his gas under control. I think Oliveira's in for a rough night, but I think it's going to be a hell of a fight. I think Gaethje catches the chin, though. I'm going to go with 3rd round KO.
Ooh. I have a different pick from both of you.
A draw?
What's that?
No contest, eye poke.
No contest. No contest.
Don't even speak that into existence,
Yeah, you're right.
man.
I shouldn't even have said that.
Oh, good God.
Oh, God.
So, I think something happened for Charles when he fought Tony. I think he unlocked a new level when he fought Tony, obviously. I mean, yes, 10 in a row. Prior to Tony, he submitted Kevin Lee. Prior to that, he knocked out Jared Gordon. So he really found his way into the upper echelon somewhat recently. Other than Tony, against Michael Chandler, he got dropped bad in the first round, almost got finished. Against Dustin Poirier, he got dropped in the first round. I think if he keeps testing fate and going up against these killers and these guys at the very top of the lightweight division who have huge power, who bring in a lot of firepower, I think the law of averages is going to catch up to him. Even though he has 10 fights in a row coming into Saturday night, I see Justin Gaethje having just as much, if not more, firepower than both of the guys that Oliveira just beat. And if and when Justin Gaethje catches him and will sting him in the first round, I'm going to say Justin Gaethje by TKO in round number 1. And will be and new, like the name of our show,
Boom.
And new UFC lightweight champ.
I also want to point out. Sorry. I really quick want to point out that Justin Gaethje's footwork is also something that doesn't get talked about enough.
Yes.
As well as Charles Oliveira's newfound striking IQ. So Oliveira has implemented these knees in his game that are absolutely phenomenal. Whenever he gets into close distance, he throws really good knees, and these knees go right into the stomach and the solar plex of these guys, and it hurts them. It hurts them for sure. And these guys, their arms drop. That takes a little bit of gas out of them, and we continue. But he's been using that pretty consistently over the last few fights. With that being said, where I think the knee is actually going to play against him in this fight, because I think it's going to open him up to hooks from Justin Gaethje. The one thing that happens when he throws a lot of those knees is one of those arms is going to have to drop in order for him to throw it with a little bit of oomph to it. And I think Justin Gaethje is one of those guys that would eat that knee while throwing that hook at the same time, just because he'll see the opening. I expect that to be something to look out for. I think that might be a vulnerability that I don't know if Oliveira is considering.
Okay.
I love both of your guys' breakdowns. I fully agree that round 1 is the danger round. I think Charles absolutely needs to find a way to survive round 1. I agree that of everyone Charles has fought, if you take Chandler, Dustin, Gaethje, the guy who I think, you're saying, oh, he got caught by all of them. Of all of them, the guy who could catch him and not let him off the hook, I think, is Justin Gaethje. Mm-hmm. I also think, though, that Charles is going to have a 4-inch reach advantage, and that he may be the one hurting Gaethje in a lot more of these exchanges than people think. Mm-hmm. And, yeah, as I said, I'm going to roll with him. But, yeah, it's a great freaking fight.
Either way, can't wait. This is the kind of fight that even thinking about it right now gives me palpitations. Like my heart starts to race. When I think about the moment right when they're about to when whoever the ref is going to be is about to say, "Fight, are you ready? Are you ready? Let's fight." I'm going to be heart pounding out of my chest.
Yeah, I would pay $70 just to watch them two fight if there was no other card involved.
Yeah, man. And this card is sick.
I wouldn't even think twice.
Oh my god! All right, that does it, boys. We have previewed UFC 274, Oliveira versus Gaethje. Thank you so much, guys.